The whole spectacle kicked off with Count Benjamin Ischpern standing tall, reading his wedding vows. His voice carried across the room, promising love and loyalty to his new bride, loud enough that there wasn't a soul who didn't hear. Helena, standing amidst the throng, couldn't help but reflect on the irony. Why is it that people only truly grasp the weight of happiness once it slips just out of reach? Her father lingered nearby, a mix of soft-heartedness and indecision in his eyes, forever caught between support and hesitation. Despite all the arguments and family drama, her stepmother was the only one showing genuine grief for her predicament. Her stepsisters and brother, always in the background, still radiated love and concern, even though Helena had spent years brushing them off. And suddenly, it hit her. She had never truly realized how much her family meant to her until now. Just then, a voice cut through her reverie, calling her name. It was her turn. Her new husband, standing there with that infuriating, victorious grin, was looking straight at her. Helena thought, "Laugh it up, pal, while you still can." Helena Winston, Countess Ischpern now, made a silent vow to drag that man straight to hell if given the chance. The chaos had started a month ago at the Emperor's banquet. Helena had been locked in a chess match with a friend while exchanging idle banter with Crown Prince Rufus Arfend, her childhood companion. The conversation, light at first, quickly turned serious. She confessed, almost defensively, that she had no desire to be wed. The fear of losing herself, of becoming someone unrecognizable, gnawed at her. Twirling a chess queen between her fingers, Helena compared herself to her mother, Lady Sandra, who had left her behind without a backward glance. Rufus, ever perceptive, admitted he too feared losing Helena not to another, but to the very idea of her changing. He admired her free spirit, that wild, untamed essence that made her so unlike anyone else. And then, without warning, he grabbed her hand, showering her with compliments. Helena froze, her instincts screaming that something was off. She yanked, tried to pull away, but his grip was iron-strung. Heart racing, she grabbed a chess box from the table, warning him she wouldn't be responsible for her actions if he dared say another word. And then came the bombshell. Rufus, dead serious, confessed he was in love with her. Her breath caught. The world around her slowed, each word echoing with the weight of impossibility. Before she could process it, the Crown Prince's fiancé appeared, Adela Viard, screaming about the betrayal, the scandal. Chaos erupted. And then, the commanding voice of Empress Clarissa Arfend, Rufus's mother, thundered across the hall. Her presence alone silenced the room. Helena, caught squarely in the eye of this storm, reminded herself to breathe, to stay sharp. Survival in the lion's den required composure, and she intended to master it. She planned to explain everything, calmly, step by step, proving her innocence in this royal mess. But before she could, Rufus yelled, boldly, recklessly, that he would not marry his fiancée, that he loved Helena. For a heartbeat, she stood frozen, unable to reconcile his words with reason, silently begging the court not to take him seriously. But it was too late. The fiancé had already collapsed into tears. The Empress took control, ordering her son and his fiancé to follow her, brushing Helena aside with a simple, "We'll deal with you later." Helena was dismissed to her chambers, left reeling as the absurdity of the situation sank in. Her life had been flipped upside down, twisted into a new, bewildering reality. Days later, Helena wandered the imperial gardens, their vast expanse and exquisite beauty a stark contrast to the chaos that had erupted within the palace walls. Lost in thought, she realized she couldn't even recall the last time she had walked these paths. Every rose, every sculpted fountain seemed to mock her, reminding her of the life she once knew and the whirlwind she had been thrown into. Finally, Helena reached a small table tucked in a quiet corner of the royal tea room, where the Madame herself sat, calmly sipping her tea. The Madame greeted Helena warmly, commenting that it had been far too long since she last saw the young woman wandering the palace halls. She added, with a wry undertone, that she hadn't expected the meeting to be prompted by such a grim matter. Helena's thoughts instantly flashed to her parents, her father instructing her to kneel and apologize sincerely, and her mother cautioning her never to bring up the crybaby loser, Rufus. Helena mentally scoffed at their theatrics, convinced that all she needed to do was lay everything out plainly. Helena had assured Her Majesty that she had nothing to worry about, and the Empress confirmed she believed her, a small relief washing over her. Overjoyed, Helena began thanking Her Majesty only for the Empress to cut her off. The room suddenly felt heavier as the Empress revealed that rumors of the Crown Prince's secret affair had already begun spreading, and the royal family's reputation was teetering on the edge. The question followed naturally. How did Helena propose to fix this mess? Helena, nearly panicked, started begging for guidance, hoping the Empress would just spell out exactly what she was meant to do. The Empress leaned back slightly, exuding authority, and laid down the law. Helena was to marry the man the Empress had chosen. Helena's job practically hit the floor. She tried to bargain, suggesting she could just disappear from the capital for a while, perhaps a quiet stint in a convent, but the Empress's eyes were sharp and unyielding. Then came the revelation that made Helena's stomach knot. The Empress explained that she had been tracking a dangerous faction for some time, a group threatening the peace of the empire. Their movements, she revealed, were linked to Count Benjamin Ischpern. The Count, she added, was as cautious as a bird, yet as savage as a predator, an enigma that had kept her at bay for years. Helena, unsure where this was heading, dared to ask, her voice trembling, what exactly the Empress meant. The answer was chilling. Helena must marry the Count, become his closest confidant, and uncover his secrets to report back to the crown. The thought of becoming a spy, living under the same roof as a man whose mind and habits she could barely imagine, was unbearable. Helena gripped her dress, fear constricting her chest, instinctively wanting to refuse. But the Empress's voice cut through her panic, stern and unyielding. This was not a request, it was an order. And besides, it was framed as a mission of honor for the empire itself. Yet the Empress sweetened the decree with a tantalizing promise. If she succeeded, she would become famous across the empire, a hero whose deeds would be sung for generations. She'd be granted a high title, vast lands, and freedom beyond that enjoyed by any other woman in the kingdom. In essence, this was Helena's chance to live on her own terms.
Marriage had never been an aspiration for Helena. She had never dreamt of a grand romance, and the whole notion had always felt more like a trap than a blessing. People around her insisted this was the perfect time for her to marry, that failing to do so would bring disaster. But Helena couldn't understand what exactly was at stake. Marriage, for her, had always been a ceremonial cage. The Empress's words, the command, the promise, the strategy, flickered through Helena's mind like a sudden lightning strike. This was all her own naivete catching up to her. Still, a thread of logic anchored her. If she played her cards right, this marriage would not be an obligation. It could become a tool, a title, land, freedom. And even if she chose to divorce in the future, at least she would have leveraged the opportunity. The alternative, resisting entirely, would plunge her into a life of compliance or regret. If she was to face this hell regardless, she might as well navigate it on her own terms. That day before the wedding, in her room, Helena reflected on what the coming days would mean. Marriage itself was not the real goal. It was a means to an end, a strategic step in a far larger game. Despite all the planning and orders from the Empress, Helena still felt off. Was this pre-wedding jitters or something deeper? She couldn't shake the thought that lingered in the back of her mind. Why had Count Ischpern accepted the marriage proposal so quickly? Even a seasoned debt collector would have moved slower. The man was supposed to be cautious as a little bird and fierce as a wild beast. But here he was, eager to marry her. Helena's mind raced. Maybe something was wrong with him. With a frustrated huff, she yanked the ornamental decorations from her hair, glaring at the maid responsible. Why had anyone thought it was a good idea to heap all this nonsense onto her head? To her, today was nothing special, merely another routine day. Her maid understood, but added that the adornments suited her perfectly anyway. Helena rolled her eyes, not convinced. As she stepped out of her chambers, Helena was immediately surrounded by her younger half-sister, Ira Winston, and her brother, Henry. Henry, ever the clueless one, asked why Helena looked so stunning and what all the fuss was about. Ira, the younger sister, laughed at him, calling him hopelessly clueless, since everyone clearly knew it was the celebration where Helena was to meet her fiancé. Helena couldn't help but grin. Ira was right. This chaos was all about her wedding. She glanced at her siblings and asked if she looked pretty. She had told the maids to keep it simple, looking like it was just any other day. But predictably, no one had listened. Suddenly, a stern voice cut through the chatter. Sister Elise Winston, the eldest half-sister, appeared, scolding Henry and Ira for hugging Helena too roughly lest they wrinkle her wedding dress. Helena quickly acknowledged her presence. She noticed Elise was reading something about the problems with exit clauses in trade history. Helena raised her eyebrow, noting her sister's growing interest in finance. Helena complimented Elise, calling her the pride of the Winston family, a genetic marvel basically impossible to top. Elise, blushing slightly, wondered aloud if the sisters would get much time together, confessing she didn't want Helena to leave the capital, even though everyone considered Helena lucky. Helena reassured her it wasn't that bad. Then, with a grin, she shared her secret plan. She intended to become a spy, get rich, and gain fame. Elise, not impressed, declared she was done talking to Helena. Helena guessed it was the usual half-sister teasing, and at least told her not to start with that nonsense. Before Helena could respond, the maids came running, shouting that something remarkable had happened. Count Ischpern had arrived. They gushed over him, saying the rumors were true. He was stunningly handsome. Helena's heart skipped a beat. So this was the catch. At this rate, everyone at the banquet would only have eyes for Count Ischpern. One maid turned to her, asking where she intended to go. Helena ordered them to retrieve all the hair accessories and adornments that had been removed, determined not to be outshone at her own celebration. The maids promised perfection. Elise mumbled that they'd stay out of the way, while Ira refused to leave her sister's side, gazing at her in awe. At the banquet hall, amidst the chaos, Rufus approached Helena, confessing that he would always be her queen even if she married another. Helena barely registered it, distracted by her own conflicting thoughts. On one hand, being forced into marriage wasn't ideal, but her husband turning out to be a hottie? Well, that wasn't so bad. On the other hand, in a situation where she might have to outwit or betray someone, having a stunning future husband could easily become an obstacle. And then, there he was. Count Ischpern entered the hall and Helena froze. He was even more breathtaking in person than she had imagined. How had such a man remained hidden away in some southern village all this time and still remained unmarried? Her future husband stepped forward, bowing gracefully, and kissed her hand with a charm that made her pulse skip. "Benjamin Ischpern, at your service," he said smoothly. Then, with a courteous yet confident smile, he asked Lady Winston if he might steal her for the first dance. At first, she had been thrown off by her husband's charm. Count Benjamin Ischpern had that effortless, disarming way about him, the kind that made hearts skip beats and minds freeze for a split second. But she quickly got her act together, plastered on a polite smile, and told him that no one would mind if they danced all night. After tonight, they were husband and wife after all. As they glided across the dance floor, Helena realized she was in trouble, big trouble. Her carefully maintained composure was crumbling faster than she had expected. She couldn't stop noticing him. The Count's perfect posture, the way his strong hands guided her, his face that could make angels weep, and a body that was frankly impossible to ignore. This was a disaster waiting to happen. The Count, sensing her momentary stumble, apologized for being clumsy. He claimed he'd never danced at fancy events like this before. Helena, ever quick on her feet, stammered that for a beginner, his movements were flawless. Benjamin admitted he had actually been practicing just for tonight. Helena's mind raced. Killer face, smoking hot bod, sweet, charming, charismatic. And here she was, supposed to be keeping her distance for a mission. She was picturing herself somewhere in the future apologizing to the Empress for blowing the entire plan because clearly it wasn't the Count trapped in love, it was her. Trying to regain some control over her spiraling thoughts, Helena confessed to him that she hadn't danced in ages and felt a little dizzy. the Count suggested she take a break. After all, it was gonna be a long night. Helena was floored, shocked. The last thing she expected was that gentle, considerate tone. As she rested, Helena couldn't escape the Empress's words ringing in her head. Count Ischpern was connected to a dangerous group threatening the Empire's security. Her sweet, charming husband couldn't possibly be involved, could he? But Helena stilled herself. If even a hint of evil existed in him, she could handle it. She vowed to do everything she could to ensure that dark side never emerged. Well, that's it, guys. Our girl is in love. Mission failed before it even started. But then her attention shifted as she noticed Benjamin speaking quietly to his assistant, a striking blonde man who seemed to be his right hand. Curiosity piqued, Helena wondered where they were heading. After all, this was her territory, and she had every right to know. Maybe the Count and his assistant were discussing her. Surely he must be dying to reveal his true feelings about his new wife. Helena eavesdropped, catching a snippet of the conversation. The assistant had teased that the Count seemed to have a thing for his new wife. Helena rolled her eyes, thinking, duh, obviously she's basically an angel. But Benjamin snapped, denying it outright. Helena's eyes went wide. What on earth? He explained, blunt as ever, that this was a marriage of convenience. He hated nobles. She was just another spoiled, typical noblewoman. He couldn't stand her flirting, her posturing, her very air of entitlement. Pathetic, he called it.
The assistant whispered a warning to keep it down, questioning if the Count really disliked her that much. He shrugged, dismissing the question. It wasn't about liking or disliking Helena. He simply found nobles repulsive. The assistant, ever practical, muttered that divorce was probably around the corner. Benjamin coldly noted that by then, Helena's dowry would be gone and she'd be returning empty-handed. His assistant chimed in, concerned about the ceremonial outfit budget and whether the return trip for the Countess was covered. At that point, Helena no longer cared to listen. To say she was heartbroken would be an understatement. Re-entering the hall, Helena was immediately swept up in congratulations from the guests. Some blonde woman remarked that the newlyweds looked perfect together. A man added that today couldn't possibly be happier. Helena politely apologized to everyone, explaining she wasn't feeling well and would retire to her room. No one had any idea what awaited her behind closed doors. A minute later, Helena collapsed onto her bed, cursing her fate and the man she had been forced to marry. Her mind replayed the cold, calculating glance the Count had given her during the dance. He hadn't been enchanted by his young wife. No, he'd been looking at her like she was a walking sack of gold. And the realization left her furious. How could she, Helena Winston, the most desired woman in the capital, have almost fallen for a man like Benjamin Ischpern, even for a second? Just thinking about it made her blood boil. The pretty face, the charming smile, it had almost distracted her from the rot underneath. But Helena quickly reminded herself this wasn't a romance novel. This was war. And in her mind, she pictured Count Ischpern begging for mercy once all his dirty deeds were exposed. Even then, no matter how much he begged, it wouldn't save him. She shook off the thought, telling herself to quit dwelling on useless fantasies and get ready for bed. The wedding was early tomorrow. She had to make it to that godforsaken backwater in one piece. She wasn't supposed to crash just yet. She needed to wash up, change, and gather herself. Except when she opened her eyes again, she realized she dozed off right there. Makeup smudged, hair out of place, her fancy dress wrinkled and a mess. Just as she was about to groan in frustration, a sudden noise broke the silence. Something coming from the balcony. A burglar? Unlikely, she thought. Who in their right mind would try to rob the Winston estate? Helena carefully called out, asking if anyone was there. A familiar voice answered. Her heart skipped a beat. She opened the balcony door and found Crown Prince Rufus grinning back at her. "What the hell are you doing here?" she demanded. He said he'd come to apologize, which, naturally, only made Helena hotter than ever. She launched into a tirade, scolding him for taking so long to realize his part in her being forced into marriage. Rufus stammered excuses about being followed, claiming he couldn't come sooner, and insisted he wasn't just there to apologize. He wanted to reveal the truth about Benjamin Ischpern. Helena raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Let me guess, he's just a broke jerk with a rotten personality?" she asked flatly. Rufus froze, stunned. He wanted to know how she already knew, but Helena ignored him. She didn't care about his curiosity. She only asked if he thought she'd give him a medal for this revelation. She reminded him that she had ended up with this fiancé because of the Empress's orders. Rufus warned her not to push him too hard. It was a long way down. "I don't give a damn." Helena spun around, her temper flaring, and ordered him to get out. Rufus begged her to wait. He said he wanted her to trust him and run away with him. Helena jumped on him, demanding that he actually make sense. Rufus, surprisingly calm, assured her that he had a plan. Helena's resistance softened. For a moment, she entertained the thought of running away. They would drag Benjamin Ischpern's name through the mud, ruin his family's reputation. Helena felt a thrill at the thought. Finally, a way to make that smug, calculating man pay. But then, the fallout. Who would handle it? Her fleeting joy was interrupted when Rufus confessed something that made her stomach twist. She was the most important person in the world to him, and he genuinely loved her. Helena blinked, remembering all the ridiculous things he had said before. What was she even thinking? This was Rufus, after all. Rufus continued, painting a picture of a world where it would just be the two of them, shedding all chains and burdens, running away to find true freedom. Helena told him to calm down. The balcony was cramped, and if he slipped, she wouldn't catch him. Then a commanding voice cut through the tension. Count Ischpern. He demanded that Lady Winston's safety be checked immediately because he'd seen a strange shadow on the balcony. Helena, seizing her chance, slipped back into her room unnoticed, while the maid tried to talk the Count down, pointing out that he wasn't technically married yet. Rules be damned. Of course, the Count barged in anyway. Helena, furious, called him a barbarian for storming into his bride's room the night before the wedding. Benjamin, unfazed, shot back that in a few hours he would be married to Lady Winston, so what was the big deal? Then he added, his gaze shifting to the side, that the real problem seemed to be standing right behind her. Count Ischpern ordered Helena to step aside, insisting he needed to check the balcony.
All right, let's take a quick peek inside Benjamin's head. Nobility, family, marriage, none of it was his thing, but he needed it all. And he was going to get it, one way or another. Benjamin knew better than to expect anything from a situation like this. No matter how striking the woman he was about to marry might be, he had to keep it together. After all, he was dealing with a high and mighty lady who had no clue about the real world. On top of that, she was caught up in some scandal with the crown prince. Judging by the way so many men fawned over Helena, Benjamin knew exactly what kind of person she was. Even if her smile could blind someone, there was no way she was ever going to snag him. Earlier, during a stroll through the palace garden, the Count had noticed some noise. Looking up, he saw a man on Lady Winston's balcony. Benjamin wasn't even surprised. He'd long since learned not to get his hopes up. Back in the present, Helena was fuming, demanding to know why the Count needed to, quote, check the balcony when, as far as she could see, everything was fine. Benjamin, of course, saw through her act and accused her of being a terrible liar. Helena fired back, insisting there was nothing there. She threatened to call the servants if he didn't let it go. Benjamin, however, wasn't fooled. Helena's reaction told him one thing: there was definitely someone on the balcony. He urged her to stop lying, to stop being cowardly, and just tell the truth. Helena, of course, was outraged. How dare he insult her like that? She screamed at him with everything she had. And then, relief. She spotted Prince Rufus safely below, held up between the bushes. Helena exhaled. At least he was okay. Benjamin asked calmly if that was the crown prince. Helena admitted it. Apparently, Rufus had shown up uninvited in the dead of night. Helena protested. What else was she supposed to do? Benjamin, voice heavy with resignation, said the rumors were true.
Helena argued, insisting they weren't. It had all been made up. After all, she and the prince had been friends since childhood. Benjamin raised an eyebrow and asked why she kept it a secret. Sarcastically, he wondered if childhood friends had secret greetings no one else could witness. Helena shot back, asking how she could possibly announce that to the entire palace. The Count was outraged. How could she just open the door to someone who had broken in at night? Helena explained that she only opened it because leaving the prince out there would attract unwanted attention. Benjamin, of course, remarked that now he saw just how shameless his bride really was. With a stern warning, he told Helena she'd better behave from now on. He did not want to witness such disgrace again. And then his last words hit like a blade. Don't dare break the vows they were about to make. Helena seethed. This was coming from Count Ischpern, a man who had already planned to ditch her after draining her dowry. Back to the day of the wedding, while the Count was reading his vows, she flashed back to yesterday, remembering Benjamin's sermon about not dishonoring a couple's promises. But who had broken that promise first? Certainly not Helena. That broke, savage, uncultured pig, if his inner life was any indication, was clearly mixed up with some dangerous crowd. Her irritation and suspicion were abruptly cut short when the Count snapped, reminding her it was her turn to make the oath. Helena swore to love him and only him forever. And yet behind that polite vow, she made her own secret promise. She would uncover whatever dark secrets her husband was hiding and bring him down no matter what it took. Even if he ended up groveling for forgiveness, Helena Winston was ready. The moment the priest boomed that Helena and Benjamin were now man and wife before the gods, Helena was already plotting. In her head, she thought, "You better not expect any mercy from me, buddy." Hours later, she stood at the northern gates of Doris, the only way to get between the south and the north. Beyond these gates lay enemy territory. Once she stepped through, there was no turning back. Helena squared her shoulders and declared to herself that she was ready. Benjamin, ever the cautious husband, asked if it was her first time using the gates and reminded her to stay sharp. In her mind, Helena rolled her eyes. "I'm plenty focused without your advice, hubby," she muttered. Suddenly, the world started spinning, and she found herself back at the south gates and lanes, her stomach twisting with motion sickness. She took a deep breath and pulled herself together. She had a carriage to catch, and there was no time to waste. Little did she know what awaited her. As the carriage rolled forward, Benjamin shot her a creepy smirk. "Hello, welcome to Ischpern Castle, Lady Winston," he said, as though that explained everything. Helena grabbed her head and groaned. "No way, this is just the beginning of my nightmare." She gaped at the castle. Okay, it looks like a castle, but why is half of it gone? Benjamin just shrugged. It's not exactly gone, just slightly scorched. Helena blinked, incredulous. Slightly? That's way more than slight. "Does anyone even live here?" she asked cautiously. The Count responded, as if her question were absurd. "Weird question. Of course it's livable. And you, Helena, will be living here too." And just like that, Helena Winston, the Count's daughter, accustomed to warmth, safety, and spotless comforts, found herself thrust into a soot-stained castle staffed by a ragtag team of clueless servants. When one maid attempted to brush her hair, Helena snapped, "Back off, I can do it myself." While brushing her hair herself, she began plotting her next moves. Step 1, find the key to stopping the shadowy threat looming over the empire. Step 2, break out of this castle. She considered taking shortcuts, but the sudden crash of boxes hitting the floor interrupted her strategy. Spinning around, Helena sighed in frustration. Were these servants always this sloppy? Did Benjamin seriously expect her to live with this chaos? Mentally, she begged God for patience. Determined to assert some order, Helena laid down the rules for the staff. Cleanliness, she lectured, was the first step to running a castle properly. Dust should be removed, cobwebs cleared, and old bedding and tubs replaced before guests arrived. She reminded them that maintaining the castle and serving its people should be a point of pride, not a chore. Just as she wrapped up, Benjamin appeared, his expression calm but authoritative. "That's enough," he said. He asked them to leave. There was no need to humor the lady's whims any longer. Helena bristled. "Whims? I was just pointing out the work that needed doing." Benjamin smirked, unwavering. "Don't expect the same standards as the Winston estate. Servants here can't live up to your expectations. Pride is well and good, but not everyone values it the way you do." Helena paused, thinking. "So, if I need anything, who do I go to?" Benjamin's answer perked her up. "You come to me." Now for the most important request. Helena leaned closer and said matter-of-factly that she needed a cup of rose dew every morning. Without it, her day simply wouldn't feel right. Benjamin blinked in shock. Helena, inwardly amused, thought, "This is what a whim looks like, darling husband." Benjamin, clearly bewildered, asked if she was some kind of fairy. Helena, with the tiniest smirk, replied that she might just be. Benjamin made it abundantly clear that he would ignore any requests like that. Helena almost choked on her own disbelief. Not only could she not train the castle's hapless servants, but now her carefully thought-out requests were just going to be dismissed entirely. She let out a frustrated shout, calling her husband a total egomaniac. Benjamin, unfazed, stated firmly that Helena Ischpern needed to get used to a new way of life. There were no doting parents to cater to her every whim here. No maids to pamper Lady Helena morning, noon, and night. She'd just have to adjust. Helena, smirking, shot back that he was dead wrong. The real problem was a count who couldn't even manage his own estate responsibly. How could someone so incompetent even call himself an adult? Right, Count Crybaby? Benjamin snapped back, telling her to think whatever she wanted. That only fueled her fire. Helena declared she absolutely would think whatever she wanted, and added pointedly that a count who hated whims wouldn't dare share a bed with a spoiled brat like her. Benjamin, cool as ever, assured her she had nothing to worry about. He wouldn't go near the bed even if she begged, and anyway, he didn't sleep in beds. Helena allowed herself a small victory. One redeeming quality. Fine. I'll take the bed for myself, and Benjamin better not even think about getting close. Hours passed. Helena tossed and turned, her mind buzzing, while Benjamin silently wondered why she wasn't asleep yet. She looked exhausted. He cut himself off before he could care too much. If he started thinking about it, he'd already lost. Then Helena sat up, blinking at the room in frustration. Why was there a table here instead of a nightstand? Benjamin grumbled. First it was the pink dew, now a nightstand. She explained she needed something to grab onto to fall asleep. Without it, she'd be guaranteed nightmares, even if she drifted off. The table was useless. There was a wide gap between it and the bed, no connection. A nightstand, flush against the wall, would have been perfect. Benjamin protested, where was he supposed to find a dresser in the middle of the night? And you couldn't just swap furniture instantly. Close your eyes and count sheep, he suggested, with a tone that dared her to argue. Surely she'd be asleep before she got to 10. Helena sighed sadly. That was the point. She couldn't. She was probably losing her mind being alone in this castle. Benjamin snapped, asking why the know-it-all couldn't just handle it herself. She shouldn't drag him into this, he said, and she should be quiet because he needed to focus on his documents. Helena stared at him, her expression softening. She said, she'll figure it out herself. She muttered to herself, he's not going to get me my rose dew tea. It's my own fault for coming here and expecting to be treated well. Is sticking your hand into something really that important? He asked. There's no other way. She nodded, her eyes wide and pleading, giving him the full puppy dog look. Benjamin let out a long sigh. Slowly, he stood and stepped onto the bed, his shadow stretching over her. Helena screamed, demanding to know what he was doing, why he was climbing onto the bed. Benjamin simply replied she couldn't sleep, so he'd help her, and she'd sleep like a baby. Helena realized, with a jolt of self-awareness, that she was weak when it came to a handsome face.
But she immediately scolded herself. She couldn't fall for that again. "What do you mean by helping?" she asked, wary. Benjamin grabbed her hand and explained that he'd lie there until she fell asleep. Helena's eyes lit up. "That's it? That's all the help?" she asked happily. But Benjamin, of course, added the catch. She'd have to pay him back for this favor somehow. Helena accepted, mentally noting that it didn't mean she'd lost, she just didn't have a choice. Then, as if the night wasn't complicated enough, she asked why he wasn't sleeping in the bed. She prayed he wouldn't claim it was because of her. Benjamin, feigning surprise, asked why he'd say that. Helena explained that it was hard to sleep with a knockout like her lying next to him. The young man's reply was chillingly cool. She had nothing to do with it. Helena, still groggy from sleep, frowned and asked, bummed out, what was wrong. Benjamin explained that the bed was uncomfortable, hardly surprising considering his history. He recounted his mercenary days, how he'd spent years on brutal battlefields where letting his guard down meant death. Even while asleep, he curled around his sword like a lifeline. Yet, despite all that, there had always been a faint glimmer of hope in him, probably just kid-like optimism. He glanced at his wife and paused. Helena was asleep, completely at peace. The sight touched him. Her sleep was carefree, almost enviable, a stark contrast to his lifelong vigilance. Morning came. Helena woke up feeling surprisingly refreshed, as if she hadn't slept this well in ages. Time to start the day as Helena Winston, or Perrin if you wanted to be formal. She intended to begin her morning elegantly, but first a cup of her essential pink dew. She tugged the servant's summoning rope, and it snapped, leaving her holding it in disbelief. This wasn't a dream. It was real. She noticed something strange as she was getting out of bed. Her clothes were shoved under the bed. Furrowing her brow, Helena walked to the window and froze. Outside, Count Ischpern was practicing swordsmanship. The sight left her baffled. Her husband looked almost out of place here. Certainly his sharp looks clashed with the castle's soot-stained walls. She reached for the window and cracked the glass as if it were nothing. "Who even takes care of this dump?" she muttered angrily. Helena stopped downstairs to find a servant and figure out who was actually in charge. A timid-looking maid promised to fetch someone immediately. Soon, the cook appeared. She asked if he was the manager. He hesitated, explaining that he was about to be promoted to prep cook. Since he was the only one around, she supposed that made him the de facto person in charge for now. He admitted he wasn't actually in control of the castle, just that he'd lived there the longest, so he knew the ropes. Helena sighed, realizing there was no real manager. She pressed further, asking about the castle fire and why no cleanup had occurred in the years since. The young cook explained that the fire had happened 5 years ago. He didn't know much. His father had fallen ill, and he had been away for a couple of weeks. When he returned, everything was in chaos. The previous subjects were gone, replaced by mercenaries who demanded food. So he cooked for them. That was when he met the Count, Benjamin. He'd noticed the lack of a proper cook and decided this young man was needed. And that was how the kid became the sole cook of Ischpern Castle. He spoke those last words with pride. A small smile touched his lips, as if that memory at least was something he cherished. Helena wanted to know what the cook had learned about the castle while he'd been gone. He shared what he knew. The old count and his family had perished in the fire, but beyond that, no one left knew the truth. Helena accepted the account, sensing no reason for the cook to hide anything. 5 years had passed, and anyone connected to the previous household was gone. Someone clearly wanted to cover up the full story. She turned serious. Did the young cook realize just how dire the situation at Ischpern Castle really was? He nodded. Helena declared that as the lady of the house, she couldn't allow the castle to remain in such ruin, but she couldn't do it alone.
She needed help to restore the estate's honor. That was when the cook remembered something. 3 years ago, Mr. Kurt, the former butler, had visited. He'd given the young man a specific address in case he ever needed assistance. Helena immediately set off, arriving at the designated location. There, she met a young blonde man. Introducing herself formally as Lady Ischpern, she was met with polite surprise.
The young man said it was a great honor, but Helena quickly noted that he was clearly not the Mr. Kurt she was expecting. He introduced himself as Joe Wilton, explaining that he'd been tending the place on behalf of Sir Kurt. With a careful hand, he presented Helena with a letter from the old man. The letter spoke of loyalty and love, how Sir Kurt's family had cherished the Count's house and the beautiful castle perched atop the green hills. Even though the noble Ischpern line had long since faded, the letter implored whoever found it to help restore the estate to its former glory. Helena's stomach sank. She felt too late, too out of place. Mr. Kurt had passed on, leaving only memories and hopes. Joe explained gently that Sir Kurt had clung to life with the hope that someone from the Ischpern line might return. In the meantime, he had passed all his knowledge and experience to Joe, who had been tending the estate ever since the death of Mr. Kurt. Helena's chest tightened. She realized bitterly that she hadn't arrived in time, but then corrected herself. Not exactly her, but Benjamin. Tradition demanded that servants take pride in working for the family who protected their lands, that nobles carried the weight of their estates so their people could serve them with honor, a community bound by love for the land. Helena quietly told herself she didn't deserve any of this, not yet, not without proving herself. Joe added that even if Sir Kurt had been alive today, he might not have returned to the county house. Helena pressed, wanting to know why. The young man repeated Sir Kurt's words. The current count would never forgive anyone from the old estate. Helena, eyes widening, asked what Benjamin couldn't forgive. Was it the fire from 5 years ago? Did Sir Kurt mention anything else? Joe shook his head. The old man spoke only of the fire and how he could never return to the estate. His memory had failed him in the end, but Helena understood. Then, with a bow and a deep, respectful canal, Joe asked for Helena's permission to return to the estate. He admitted that she might not trust him yet, but he had waited for this moment for years. He wanted to repay Sir Kurt's kindness by dedicating himself entirely to restoring the estate. Helena, assessing the earnest young man, asked how she could be sure he was capable. Joe requested just 1 day to assemble enough staff to run the castle at a bare minimum level. After that, Helena could decide to officially hire him. She agreed. Meanwhile, near the house where Helena and Joe were speaking, her bodyguard waited silently. Without warning, she announced that they needed to move quickly, and he simply followed. He asked how her meeting went, and she revealed that by tomorrow morning they'd have a new manager for the estate. She instructed him to ensure that everyone in the castle knew the news. The guard tilted his head, curious. How did she even know where the former butler lived since she'd never been there before? Helena's lips curved in a small smile. He was right. She had expected this. She explained that Sir Kurt's garden might have been smaller, but it mirrored the exact layout and structure of the castle grounds. Every detail had been meticulously planned, impossible to recreate by chance. Clearly, someone, Sir Kurt, had longed to see Ischpern Castle restored to its former grandeur. Helena added quietly that she owed the old man a tremendous debt. Back home, Helena thought bitterly to herself that the castle had been a complete nightmare. She hoped that with Joe as the new manager, things might actually improve, but she didn't even want to think about the finances. The repairs alone would cost a fortune. Lost in her thoughts, she almost didn't notice when the escort approached, announcing that they had finally arrived. Helena took a steadying breath, bracing herself for what was about to come. Lady Helena paused, looking at her guard with a thoughtful tilt of her head. She asked if she remembered correctly. His name was Aaron, and he used to be a mercenary just like Master Benjamin. Aaron confirmed, and Helena couldn't help but wonder out loud if all Southern mercenaries were this polite, or if Aaron was just exceptionally well-mannered. Naturally, the compliment made him blush slightly. He explained that he was just a regular mercenary, but he had grown up with a lot of sisters who constantly reminded him to be kind to women. Helena, curious, pressed for more details about his sisters. Aaron explained that he had become a mercenary to raise dowries for his sisters so they could marry well. Helena's lips curved in a small, bittersweet smile. A man willing to sacrifice himself for a dowry. That was genuinely rare these days. The conversation about dowries triggered a memory, and Helena's eyes widened. She shouted at Aaron, demanding to know when the Count would be back. Aaron glanced towards the stables, spotting a handler leading a horse, and noted that Lord Benjamin had just returned. Helena's mind raced. She thanked Aaron quickly for the day, then blurted out that she remembered something urgent and had to run. Aaron smiled, quietly hoping the Countess would come to appreciate what a capable and steadfast man Benjamin was. It was thanks to the Count, after all, that the castle hadn't fallen apart entirely. Helena, inwardly incredulous, thought, "Are we talking about the same man who left this castle in ruins? What's so impressive about someone who can't even pick up his own clothes?" Still, she couldn't deny the small warmth in her chest. At least, she mused, she had him allowing him to sleep in a real bed beside her. Helena smiled faintly, wishing silently that this arrangement could continue just like this, as impossible as it seemed. Later, Benjamin decided to take a bath, utterly exhausted, not from a lack of sleep, but from the unexpected closeness of his wife sleeping beside him. The water rippled as he leaned back, just beginning to savor the rare solitude, when Helena burst into the room like a force of nature. "Count Ischpern!" she yelled. Benjamin froze mid-splash, startled, and timidly asked what was happening. Without a hint of embarrassment, Helena demanded her money back. She clarified that her dowry, her father's and the Empress's, funds belonged to her and must be returned. Benjamin, flustered, snapped at her to shut the door. Helena, sarcastic as ever, teased him, asking if he wanted to discuss things privately. He yelled louder, insisting she leave and close the door. But she simply laughed, stepping closer and asking why he was getting so flustered. His whole body was submerged in water.
Helena firmly stated that the dowry money had always been hers. The inheritance, the responsibilities, it all belonged to her, and she didn't need his permission. She had only come to give him a heads up. Finally, with a theatrical flourish, she yelled for him to enjoy his bath, then stormed out and slammed the door behind her. The next day, Joe introduced the temporary workers to Helena. These were people who weren't assigned elsewhere, handpicked for their potential. Joe explained that he would supervise them closely and decide who could be officially hired. Helena rested a hand on his shoulder, her silent seal of approval, and in response, he vowed not to let her down. Turning to the new recruits, he shouted, "Whether this place shines again or not, it's in your hands. Make this castle worthy of the beautiful lady and his lordship." Helena smirked, imagining Benjamin's reaction. He would have eaten that up, proudly, without a doubt. That evening, Helena noticed her husband had left early in the morning, likely sleeping somewhere else. Her thoughts drifted to the fact that she was constantly surrounded by shirtless men. It was almost laughable. If she hadn't seen some of the family men shirtless before, she might have thought all men lived this way. She sprawled across the bed like a starfish, secretly grateful. His absence meant she had the entire bed to herself. But the main question gnawed at her. Would Benjamin show up tonight, or was she on her own in this chaotic, scorched castle? The estate was still and calm, a rare reprieve from the chaos that always seemed to follow her. Even the chefs Joe had brought in were working magic in the kitchen, unique, inventive dishes that reminded her just how much talent mattered when recruiting capable people. Unfortunately, Benjamin hadn't shown up for dinner either, so Helena wasn't holding her breath. She guessed he was sulking somewhere, offended by her earlier defiance, and she was probably right. She turned her attention to the desk before her, only to discover a thick layer of dust coating it. Clearly, nobody had touched it in ages. Helena squinted, muttering under her breath the Count had to have some office supplies somewhere. Sliding open a drawer, she found a blank piece of paper, enough to get started. Perfect. She decided she would write a letter to Her Majesty, the Empress, but quickly realized she didn't even know where to start. First, she needed to describe the estate's current state. Ideally, she'd check every corner herself, but many rooms were locked and the keys were with Benjamin. Then there was the fire damage, far worse than she had anticipated. Helena began drafting. Goddaughter Helena Ischpern respectfully greets Her Majesty and honors the promise she made to her. Upon arriving, she inspected the castle and grounds. 5 years ago, Ischpern Castle suffered a fire. Afterwards, the Count dismissed all the staff. Now, the once grand castle has fallen into near abandonment. It seems the Count has allowed the property to rot. She paused, feeling a pang of guilt mixed with frustration. She wasn't trying to live in some haunted ruin, nor was she attempting to revive the family line for nostalgia's sake. But at the very least, the castle needed to be functional. Helena grimaced at her blunt wording. This letter wasn't exactly inspiring. The Empress would likely freak at her tone. She decided to reword parts, giving a little more context about the Count's shady behavior. Suddenly, she froze at the sound of heavy, angry footsteps. Benjamin was stomping toward her. She quickly penned down the destination she wanted the letter to send to and hid it away just as the door swung open. Helena yelled, startled. "You scared me half to death. Did nobody ever teach you to knock?" He waved it off. He doesn't need to knock to enter his own room. Helena shot back, her voice sharp. "I was in here and you just barged in." Benjamin smirked, dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, right. Because Lady Helena is the only one doing anything useful in this castle, obviously. Is this what you meant when you said you were going to do things your way? Bringing strangers into my castle and turning everything upside down?" Helena exploded. "What strangers?" she demanded. "You wouldn't let me use the staff we already had, so I brought in some capable people." Benjamin raised an eyebrow. Seeing his expression, Helena realized that he had already sent them packing. He shrugged, casual as ever, saying he made sure it was polite. Helena exploded. She shouted his full name, declaring that he wasn't the only one running things anymore. She was head of the county too. "What's wrong with wanting to make this place livable?" she demanded. Benjamin, leaning against the doorway with that infuriating smirk, said dryly, if she wanted to play aristocrat so badly, she could fix up annex. She could throw her little noble parties there and leave the maiden castle alone. Helena smirked back, suspicion in her eyes. Hiding something? Or just don't want anyone finding out? Benjamin stepped closer, his tone laced with challenge. "And you, my wife, anything to hide yourself?"
Helena shot back, unflinching. "Nothing at all." He sighed, clearly annoyed, muttering that he wouldn't expect anything different from such a simple person. Helena allowed a small, subtle smile. That was close. Benjamin leaned back and said calmly that people usually have boundaries, and he hoped she would respect his. Helena shot back that she was only trying to make the castle livable, but he wasn't done. "Life before and after marriage is never the same," he said, with the weight of an unspoken warning. Furious, Helena pointed at him. "I can say the same to you," she snapped, then paused, breathing hard. After a moment, she added, conceding a little, "Overall, I suppose you're right. Life after marriage," Helena added, did change, especially when it came with this level of chaos. She refused to endure it and end up miserable herself. Benjamin, of course, stated bluntly that this was entirely her problem. Helena smirked, shrugging off his comment. "That's exactly why I'm doing something about it." All she demanded was that her husband stay out of her way and hand over the keys to the castle. Benjamin's brow furrowed, indignation clear in his voice as he asked what she needed them for. Helena shot back, pointing out that the castle had countless locked rooms that the Count just callously ignored.
Benjamin, acting as infuriating as ever, claimed he had no idea what keys she was talking about. "Why open them? There's plenty of space as it is," he said, shrugging. Helena's temper flared. Plenty of space? If the castle was really fine, why were they stuck cooped up in this room? Did he even consider that there might be something important behind those locked doors? She reminded him that the way someone maintains their home speaks volumes about their character, and Benjamin's home mirrored him perfectly. Careless, indifferent, and dismissive. She pointed out, with exasperation, that when an estate can't function properly, it's always the common folk who suffer the most. Helena reminded him of how much the people he had kicked out had worked to clean and fix this place. "Look," she said, voice softening a little, but firm. "I don't know what's going on in your head, but don't take your frustrations out on everyone else in this castle." Benjamin, bummed and mumbling under his breath, mentioned that perhaps the old butler might know where the keys were. He had run everything round here. Helena's ears perked up. Who was this guy? Where could she find him? Benjamin just shrugged, looking every bit as disinterested as ever. "I don't know, and I don't care," he said. Helena rolled her eyes and decided she'd figure it out herself. Sighing, she flopped onto the bed. "It's late," she muttered, suggesting they call it a night. She beckoned Benjamin over, and he froze, flustered, unsure if she actually wanted him to lie down next to her. Helena clarified that she'd already checked the castle. There was nowhere else decent to sleep. Benjamin suggested the study again, like the previous night, but Helena shot him a look. "Study? Your bones would be screaming for mercy there." She insisted he needed to take care of himself while he was still young. Benjamin, confused, asked what she meant, but Helena didn't answer. Instead, she patted the spot next to her on the bed and gestured for him to hurry up. Finally, it clicked for Benjamin what she was getting at. Helena slid her hand under him, noting silently that his body was heavy, warm, and firm enough to make her pause. Even a stubborn rock could be useful sometimes. Benjamin, meanwhile, wondered what had gotten into his wife. She was behaving completely differently tonight. Suddenly, Helena's hand moved across his body, as if writing something on his back. He protested, half drowsy, asking where he thought she was doing. Helena grumbled, accusing him of scaring her, and called him clueless. She explained that she spelled out "thank you" for letting her use his back as a pillow. Benjamin stammered, "You're welcome," while Helena's mind wandered to the fire, the castle's decay, and the Earl's deep-seated loathing for his own estate. She didn't even notice when she drifted off to sleep, exhausted, but oddly content. The next morning, Aaron, her faithful attendant, was already waiting. He couldn't help but wonder why Helena had ordered the horses harnessed again. Just as he was about to question their destination, Lady Helena's melodious voice rang out. Aaron spun around, nearly having his eyes pop out of his head at the sight of Lady Helena. She explained in her usual dramatic flair that they were heading to see her former butler, then, almost casually, asked if her new look suited her. Aaron, ever practical, blinked and admitted he understood her desire to find Wesley, the former butler, but he still couldn't connect it to her outfit. Helena bristled, one eyebrow arching. Did he really not get it? She thought. It's obvious. If you want to make a scene in a dangerous place and survive, a gentleman's suit is perfect. Aaron tried again, cautiously, asking if she really intended to cause a scene just to find someone. Helena waved off his concern, assuring him that they wouldn't be searching actively. They'd make Wesley come to them. From now on, she insisted, she wanted to be called Aaron. Despite a flurry of questions, Aaron reluctantly agreed. When he asked where she was headed, she merely told him to follow her. Busting through the tavern door with all the grace of a storm, she cheerfully greeted the patrons, then asked if this was the biggest tavern in Goa. Immediately, someone yelled in disbelief, demanding to know why some idiot had just kicked down the door. Apparently, he's the tavern owner. His grumpy scowl softened the moment he took a good look at Helena, Aaron, and her entourage. The short lady wore expensive clothes and sparkling jewelry, and her bodyguard looked every bit as imposing and well-armed as he was. In an instant, he switched from scowl to respectful grin, bowing and greeting the esteemed guest. He admitted it was an honor for someone of his stature to visit a place like this, guessing they were seeking some grand adventure.
Helena laughed, her voice tinkling through the room. Do you really think any noble would want to come to a hole like this by choice? She teased. She cut straight to the point. She was looking for a man named Wesley, brown eyes, gray hair, tall, and in good shape. To incentivize the tavern staff, she pointed to a bag of cash and added that anyone who helped find him would be well rewarded. Aaron, ever cautious, leaned in and whispered, "Is this really your plan to get Wesley to come by making a scene until he shows up?" Meanwhile, the list of potential Wesleys in the room was growing longer by the second. Helena, unfazed, asked Aaron to repeat what kind of place this was. He explained, as always, that Goa was a bustling trading city full of merchants, mercenaries, and every manner of adventurer and vagabond. Helena nodded, pleased, confirming his description. It was a major transport hub, not far from Barwood, which meant anyone trying to lay low would have a hard time hiding here. She gestured around with sparkling eyes. "This place is amazing," she said happily, clearly taking in every chaotic detail. Aaron asked if she still planned to leave today, but instead of answering, Helena grabbed a spoonful of something from the table and shoved it into his mouth. As he chewed, she thought to herself, if a man knows someone who looks exactly like him is searching for him, he'll want to see it for himself. Hiding in a place like this was basically begging to be found. She knew getting the keys to the castle wouldn't be the hard part. The real challenge was convincing Wesley to comply while he remained completely unaware of the changes she had made. Helena's mind shifted to the bigger problem, the Count. She asked Aaron if he knew anything about what happened 5 years ago, but he admitted he didn't know much and suggested asking Lord Benjamin directly. Helena sighed. If she could, she would, but the Count was almost never at the castle. Aaron confirmed that was true, but offered a rare compliment. No matter what Helena thought of Lord Benjamin, he was a man worthy of admiration. He confessed, grudgingly, that being a mercenary, what he'd done for a living, was brutal, and that even he wasn't nearly as skilled with a sword as the Count. And the Count had saved his life countless times. Helena asked if that was the reason Aaron looked up to the Count so much, because he'd owed Benjamin his life. Aaron nodded, then shifted the conversation to a more perilous topic. He asked if she knew about the Kraken of Arlia. Helena's eyes lit up with recognition. She had heard whispers of the monstrous sea creature appearing in the Eastern Sea. That's right, Aaron confirmed. People used to sacrifice individuals to appease the Kraken, believing that these tributes would prevent a catastrophic disaster. But the tributes barely dented the problem. Sea monsters continued to attack fishing boats relentlessly. When the tributes finally stopped, the Kraken returned, bringing with it a tidal wave of terrifying proportions. Helena, intrigued, recalled rumors of a field being half-flooded with mermaids invading the city in the chaos, remembering that the people had managed to slay the Kraken. Aaron corrected her, noting that the Count himself had slain the Kraken, a feat no ordinary person could survive. Helena, impressed but puzzled, mentioned she had heard mercenary squads and allied forces had fought monsters before, celebrating their victories in the capital. She always assumed it was teamwork that had won the day. Aaron shook his head. Benjamin had taken down the Kraken, alone. Helena's eyes widened. Then why wasn't he invited to the capital? She asked. Aaron explained the Lord of Arlia had awarded Benjamin a modest reward, and after that, the Count vanished on a long, private retreat. Soon after, Ischpern Castle was set ablaze, the old Count's family perished, and Sir Benjamin ascended as the new Count of Ischpern. Aaron went on, reflecting on how mercenary life meant that people rarely inquired about one another's pasts. But once rumors of the new Count Benjamin Ischpern circulated, Aaron made the journey to the castle himself. It had been a disaster, and the Count had been in awful shape back then. Even years later, remembering how he was that day, it made sense that no one could bring themselves to ask what had really happened. The tragic incident remained shrouded in rumor, yet Aaron trusted only the Count. Suddenly, Aaron's attention snapped. He pointed out a tall, gray-haired man, asking if he could be the person Lady Helena sought. The man immediately took off, and without hesitation, Helena and Aaron launched themselves from their seats, sprinting after him, shouting for him to freeze. But the man ignored him, darting off into the crowd. The chase was on. Helena and Aaron managed to catch up quickly. Aaron grabbed the man, demanding to see his face. The man scowled, annoyed, insisting they let him go. Helena, calm but commanding, reassured him he wouldn't be harmed. She only needed him to stay put. Finally, she addressed him directly. "Sir Wesley," she said sharply, "do you even realize who's standing in front of you?"
And that's where we'll pause today. If you're dying to know what happens next, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Beneath the Story, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. You can also support the channel by leaving a super thanks. Your support keeps the story alive, one secret at a time. Thanks for tuning in, and see you in the next video.